Hi, this is Bill, and I'm just going to take a few moments here to go over on how I like to install a new servo in a car. And what I've got here is a HPI Blitz, and for the most part, it's pretty standard across most cars on how servo installations go. So this should be pretty universal, for at least the way I like to install a servo. I know everybody has different tips and tricks, and I'll do my best to incorporate some things that I've seen from others, as well as a few things that I like to do differently. For the first thing that I like to do, this is a brand new receiver. I mean, I haven't even mounted it in yet. I just finished binding it with my radio. In fact, what I've done here is I jumped right into installing the servo into the system with no servo horn installed. And the first thing that I did was, after binding the radios, I made sure that my endpoints were set to 100% for the steering, and then I made sure to zero out the trim settings, so that way the servo is perfectly straight and centered. I know it seems kind of a bit of a waste, but I went ahead and installed the servo, the base setup, so that way I can go ahead and make sure everything is centered with the servo. Then what I'm going to do next is I'm going to install the servo horn and then try to line up the ball cups with the steering. Now, it seems like a waste of time doing that, but for me, I want to get the wheels to center as perfectly center as possible when doing that. So once I've got the wheels adjusted, centered off with the servo centered off, then I could turn off the radio, remove the servo, and then go ahead and install a screw into the servo horn, and then reinstall the servo as one final step. And the idea is that I want to make sure that the car goes as straight and true as possible. Now, one thing that I like to do when I'm snapping my ball links on is I like to use curved nose pliers, and I like to set them underneath to give some support underneath the steering linkage, and then I'll use a 5.5 millimeter socket head, and then I'll use that as leverage to push over the ball cup, and then push the ball cup down over the ball point and snap it in place. That way, with the combination of having the pliers underneath and this on top, it doesn't put any extra stress on there when I snap that link in place. And this is one of those times where having a pair of curved needle nose pliers comes in handy when you're trying to line the tool up and get into tight spaces. This is where I'm going to go ahead and try to get this as perfectly level as possible. This might actually be a little bit too far to the right, so let's try to move this just a pinch to the left, the next line over, and that's about as perfectly straight up and down as I'm going to be able to get that servo horn. And then the idea now is to get the wheels centered as straight as possible, and then for this ball cup on top, I need to loosen that until that centers up. And as we can see, it's not quite it's too tight. I need to loosen out a few threads and back that out, and then we'll get that centered up. And once I get that in place, then I can go ahead and install the screw in the servo. Okay, I'm now satisfied with the alignment, and as far as my radio is concerned, it's set to the 0 position on the trim setting. The idea being that I want to minimize the amount of trim that I have to apply, because if I have to do trim to the right, then the servo will have less pull to the right, and then it'll have more throw to the left. So the more you have it zeroed out when you're first installing the radio, the better. And ideally, what you'll want to do is get it to the point to where, I mean, of course you're limited to whatever the spline on the servo is going to be limited to, but once you've got that as centered out as much as possible, you maximize your throw to the left and then to the right. So I haven't actually snapped the ball cup in yet, because I now need to remove the servo and install the screw in the servo horn, and then we'll come back with the final steps. Okay, I've now installed the screw in the servo horn, and I've went ahead and popped the linkages together, and I'm now satisfied. This is a 0 trim setting. The wheel should be as straight as possible. And now that I have 100% throw set in, you want to make sure that when you go all the way to the right that you don't have any binding. So if you can see right here, the servo, when I push it, it's binding a little bit there. So I need to back that out so that when the servo comes all the way over, it stops here, not over here. If you can kind of see that extra little binding in there, gotta watch out for that. You want to make sure everything is centered out to the way you're happy with it. The last thing that I like to do is I have this long straight servo wire, and usually what I'll do is I'll just take one of my tools and then coil the wire around, unplugging it from the receiver first, and coil it around, and then you get a halfway decent coil to be able to manage your wiring inside the chassis. And of course, what I usually like to use is double-sided body tape. I usually get that at Walmart or wherever your home improvement center has. They have a body molding tape that seems to work pretty well to fasten your electronics in place. And once you've got your trim settings set up, and then you minimize everything with the servo throw, then that to me is how I like to install a servo. Thanks for watching.